This weekend, you will probably show up at a neighborhood block party. You will stand in awkward silence with people you barely know until someone finally hands you a cold beer. It feels completely normal today. But for most of human history, sharing a drink was not a casual habit. It was a survival strategy. So, what actually happened when our ancient ancestors gathered around to get drunk together? The answer changes everything we think we know about trust, society, and what it means to be human. We often assume that the creation of alcohol was merely a happy accident of the agricultural revolution. We naturally picture early farmers stumbling upon fermented grains long after they established permanent settlements. The historical timeline always felt perfectly logical to our modern minds. You grow the crops first, you brew the beer second. That remained the accepted historical narrative for decades, until one discovery changed everything. We must travel back exactly 13,000 years into a completely different world. We are looking at a brutal era long before the very first domesticated fields even existed. Our ancestors were nomadic hunter-gatherers, navigating a highly unforgiving and dangerous physical environment. In 2018, researchers from Stanford University published a groundbreaking paper in the Journal of Archaeological Science. They successfully uncovered the oldest physical evidence of a functioning brewery anywhere on Earth. It was hidden deep inside Rakefet Cave, located in modern-day Israel. The cavern belonged to the ancient Natufians, who were fierce hunter-gatherers surviving in incredibly harsh landscapes. Inside this dark space, archaeologists found deep stone mortars carved directly into the solid bedrock floor. These were definitely not simple, primitive tools designed for grinding daily bread. Extensive residue analysis revealed they were intentionally manufacturing prehistoric beer on a remarkably large scale. They gathered wild wheat and wild oats from the dangerous surrounding wilderness. They meticulously crushed the plants and allowed them to ferment inside those massive stone bowls. This monumental physical effort was absolutely not intended for a casual weekend gathering. The Natufians were brewing this alcohol specifically to serve a massive communal funeral ritual. Imagine the raw emotional intensity of that ancient gathering. Dozens of tribal members crammed together into a shadowy cavern, illuminated only by flickering firelight. They consumed a thick and gritty fermented gruel together in the presence of their dead. The intoxicating effects of alcohol mixed powerfully with shared grief and rhythmic communal chanting. It created a profound psychological shift within the entire assembled group. Facing constant threats from predators and starvation required absolute collective unity to survive the darkness. Sharing that primitive beer forced them to bond deeply on a visceral emotional level. This intentional intoxication served a highly critical evolutionary purpose before civilization even began. It bound the tribe together tightly against the deadly outside world. But the night was not merely about mourning together around a sacred fire. There was a hidden biological mechanism quietly working behind the scenes. And here is the part nobody talks about. Alcohol is never just a simple liquid beverage. It has always been a highly precise neurochemical key. When early humans consumed that gritty primitive brew, it initiated a very specific biological cascade. It moved straight past the stomach and directly targeted the prefrontal cortex. This is the most sophisticated and highly evolved region of your brain. It manages complex logic and enforces strict social boundaries. It controls your inherent sense of caution. In a brutal prehistoric environment filled with constant daily threats, that caution absolutely kept you alive. You naturally distrusted anyone who existed outside your immediate family unit. Staying hypervigilant was the default state of existence. But a human society simply cannot grow if everyone remains permanently defensive. That is exactly where the fermented grain stepped in to perform its real evolutionary job. Consuming it immediately suppressed that exhausted, hypervigilant prefrontal cortex. At the exact same time, it flooded the mammalian brain with a massive wave of endorphins. These are the powerful natural chemicals that make you feel deeply safe. They actively generate an intense sensation of physical warmth and profound emotional connection. This concept is not merely a piece of clever historical speculation. In 2017, Professor Robin Dunbar published a genuinely landmark scientific study. He is a prominent evolutionary psychologist operating out of the University of Oxford. His extensive research was featured in the journal Adaptive Human Behavior and Physiology. Dunbar essentially proved that moderate alcohol consumption is functionally necessary for our species. It was the crucial evolutionary mechanism that actively allowed early humans to maintain surprisingly massive social networks. Other primates are strictly limited by their physical brain size and their daily habits. A chimpanzee can only maintain a relatively small social group by physically grooming each individual member. Humans completely bypass that rigid biological limitation by inventing chemical bonding. Drinking intoxicating liquids together allowed our ancestors to effectively groom dozens of people simultaneously. It manufactured instant trust among total strangers. It turned scattered individuals into a highly cohesive survival unit. So, how does this ancient biological survival hack actually play out today? Look very closely at a typical summer block party in any American suburb. We currently live in a modern culture highly defined by strict, unyielding individualism. You carefully maintain your own neatly fenced private yard. You drive silently alone inside your own climate-controlled car. You are taught to value your personal space and privacy above almost everything else. When you first step onto that neighbor's driveway, your prefrontal cortex is fully active and heavily guarded. You engage in very polite but incredibly distant small talk about the local weather. You instinctively maintain strong, invisible psychological walls around yourself. You are fundamentally acting exactly like a cautious, defensive primate assessing potential territorial threats. Then the plastic cooler is finally opened. You take a few simple sips of a standard domestic beer. Suddenly, those invisible suburban fences begin to rapidly melt away. You catch yourself laughing loudly at a terrible joke told by a guy you barely even know. You start sharing highly personal stories with neighbors you usually actively avoid. That is definitely not just the alcohol making you clumsy or tired. That is a highly targeted chemical intervention actively suppressing your deeply ingrained modern individualism. Your brain is flawlessly recreating the exact same internal neurochemical environment of those ancient Natufians. You are unknowingly executing a 13,000-year-old software program designed strictly for human survival. Your logical prefrontal cortex is temporarily powered down. Your core endorphin system is fully activated and running the entire show. The shared beer is successfully tricking your modern, isolated brain into forming a critical alliance against the dark wilderness. But here is what we ultimately lost in the process. Think about that cold beer on a quiet suburban lawn. You are not just participating in a casual modern American pastime. You are holding a highly engineered tool of ancient human survival. For millennia, this exact neurochemical reaction kept our fragile ancestors alive by forcing solitary people to trust the strangers beside them. Today, we simply call it unwinding after a long week. We traded the deadly wilderness for neat fences and paved streets, but the primitive brain still remembers exactly what that liquid does. We didn't just learn to drink, we learned to survive.